America, discrimination would be part of it, and that we had to accept that and excel beyond that.
If I'm walking down a street and there's 6 black kids on one side of the street and it's at night and they're just goofing around, and I'll probably cross the street and walk on the other side. And my guess is if it was 6 white kids, I'd probably just continue walking down the street and walk through them.
I was walking on State Street, and a carload of white guys came down the street and slowed up and start yelling, "Nigger, nigger." I mean, at the top of their lungs, "Nigger!" And they said it louder and louder. And fortunately they were in the car and they did not come back. But that was a pretty shocking incident. It's not the first time I've been called nigger.
Every day. I mean,
give me an example.
Even beside just being called nigger, when you walk into a store, having the security guards follow you, when just the expectation that you're there to do something you're not even supposed to be there. It's something you live with every day. And it's something that I think a lot of people in this room don't and can't understand.
Freshman at UW-Madison, and I was also called nigger. And that was the first time that I've ever experienced that on that campus. And it's something that you can't really understand because as a minority, it doesn't even hit you as happening until maybe 5-10 seconds afterwards because you're not used to that.
And I know it's a stupid question, but tell me what that feels like. To someone like me, who you're absolutely right, that's never happened, obviously, to me. What is that experience? How can you, can someone like me understand what that is?
I think somebody can. On the university campus, we had a jazz and poetry open mic jam, and it was a social outlet geared for minorities because there are not many on the campus. And individuals who were Caucasians that came and were maybe 1%, they were the only Caucasians in that environment, said that they had experienced discrimination and were angry about it weeks after this outing had occurred. And it was the first time anything like that had ever happened to them. It was something completely new and foreign, and they did not know how to deal with it. So I think you can, but it's putting yourself in a situation where you can experience that, and not many people want to.
I'm speaking from experience when I say that the way people react to you affects you greatly as a young person coming up in a world that you don't know anything about. I played football, and I went to a prep school in New Hampshire. We played a game in Maine. I got off the bus to go into a rest area, walked in. There was more people sitting in this room than sitting in this room in a single bathroom, men. I walked in. They parted like the Red Sea, everyone looking at me. I walked to a stall. It was silent. I walk out. It's silent. I opened the door, and a white lady with her daughter didn't happen to see me until she bumped into me. She turned around and screamed. And I was 14 years old. This molded my mind. I can't help but to look at people like, man, you're going to fear me just for who I am. I'm a young person. I'm more scared of you than you should be of me, coming up. But these were the real reactions. It was unadulterated. It was no worry about being politically correct or thinking that you're going to be criticized as a racist. It was just a natural reaction.
So this happens. So how can we address that?
I think we all have to, as individuals, take it upon ourselves on an everyday basis, not just when it's cool to be in a forum and discuss these issues or Black History Month, or when it's, the nation is going to take a look at race issues. No, this is an everyday occurrence. This is stuff that happens to people on an everyday basis. And until everyone takes it upon themselves to break that down and realize, why do I stereotype people? Why am I going to look at you and feel that I have more power over you just because of the color of my skin, or that you're not as intelligent as I am? Then we're not going to get anywhere, because we can talk for days. But until action occurs, there's not going to be any change.
In response to the gentleman who just spoke, I think we can talk about the differences and the discriminatory practices towards people of different ethnic backgrounds. But the truth of the matter is the discrimination that blacks have experienced in this country far exceeds the discrimination of any other ethnic group. And we were discriminated against and continue to be discriminated discriminated against solely because of our color. Now, you said that you were discriminated against because of the way you spoke. Well, just imagine your skin color is white, and the majority of the people in this country, their skin color is white. And so you're going to be accepted first because of your skin color. We're looked at solely because of our skin color and in a negative light.
Well, I think it's interesting because, and I appreciate your comments, the issue of race, it is more than just a race issue. I also tend to agree with you that just because of the ethnic makeup that you happen to be your skin color, there is that immediacy of lack of acceptance. So you take that immediacy of lack of acceptance because of race and then tie in a difference in ethnicity, language, and we have a huge problem in America right now that needs to be addressed.
This gentleman brought up the issue that because of your ethnicity and because of your language, that you haven't suffered as much as African Americans. Do you also, by extension, mean Hispanics?
Discrimination by any nature is wrong. And certainly there's discrimination against Hispanics. But your skin color, there's more discrimination against a dark-skinned Hispanic than a lighter-skinned Hispanic.
Isn't that true of lighter-skinned blacks than darker-skinned blacks?
Well,
I mean, let's not cut hairs here.
Coming from a European perspective, a lighter-skinned black is still a black. There may be that perception between blacks. A lighter-skinned black might be considered to be a supreme person more so than a darker-skinned black.
So the first problem is what I see when I see you.
Correct.
And that's where it starts.
Correct.
Yeah, but it goes beyond that because, one of the things that I like to stress is that Hispanics, Latinos have been discriminated because of their color, whether they're dark or not, and also because they speak Spanish. And not just by whites, by African Americans too. And I want to stress that because, you're comparing me to the gentleman over there. You're comparing Hispanics to the gentleman over there, and that's not the same thing.
All right, let's if we can understand the point, let's hold it there. There are obviously lots of levels to this.
Discrimination is discrimination. And I will agree with the gentleman that Hispanics are discriminated against too. But being of a lighter skin, like that man over there who said he was from Greece, you can blend in. Your second or third generation can marry a Caucasian, and he will be blended in and be accepted somewhere as being white. Black, no matter if we marry someone who's white, our child is going to be deemed black. Even if he's a fair-skinned black, he's going to be deemed black. And it's not so much as individual discrimination as far as it is institutionalized discrimination. That's the crux of the problem. When we deal with institutionalized discrimination, then we'll deal with discrimination in America.
And how do we begin to deal with that?
For one, we have to take it as individuals, okay? And I mean, if you're on a job and you're white and you say that you don't discriminate, but you know of instance of other individuals on that job that are discriminatory and you don't speak out, then you just as much as a problem as the individual that's discriminating, because you're not voicing or fighting the discrimination. You're allowing it to exist. A prime example, and I'm going to say, is you got $1 billion worth of construction going on in the city of Milwaukee right now. And the black in the inner city of Milwaukee is totally left out. I mean, with everything that's going on, all the changes that's being made, I mean, black people in the inner city of Milwaukee is left out. These are self-supporting jobs. If you want to really bring about economic change, really want to address issues, give people supporting jobs. Why are people coming in from 100 miles from the suburbs and traveling into the inner city of Milwaukee and doing work when you got a guy standing across the street that has lost all hope? All he has to do is get up in the morning and drink out of 40 ounce because he has no hope.
I am saying that discrimination, bigotry, and all these different words all have different meanings to different people. And we can sit here and talk about it all we want to. It is not going to change either one of our mind until we begin to look at this world in a way that it's supposed to be looked at, and that's between economic development, power to the people, and begin to take our cities, countries, rural areas and municipalities back, and let it be ruled by the people, for the people. And then we'll begin to remove some of this confusion we have in the city of Milwaukee. And some of that confusion, again, have been stated here by Lincoln Park Community Center when we extended to you to keep this dialogue going. And we haven't got an answer yet about what is happening June the 5th at Lincoln Park to keep this dialogue going. Until we get this happening, until we can network and continue to network, we are not going to solve anything. We can talk all we want to.
All right. Police officer approached me, shows me their badge, an undercover badge, saying that they need to question me. They pulled me to the side and refused to throw me against, I guess what appears to be some phones, and say that they thought, or they think I'm a drug dealer coming out of Los Angeles or some kind of area in California who was trying to smuggle drugs into Wisconsin, into Milwaukee. And they picked me, the only black guy on the plane, or waiting for his luggage. They picked me and went through my stuff, totally embarrassed me in front of everybody.
If I was working in my backyard and I want to go to the grocery store and pick something up, and I go dressed the way I am from doing the yard work, is when I would get treated that way more often. And I would get angry because I would have to get changed, showered up, get in my best clothes to go to the store in order to not be treated like I stole what I have.
I play soccer. I've been playing soccer since I was 3 years old. And I was dribbling the ball, taking the ball down towards their goal area, and I dribbled a couple of guys, and the third guy just chopped me down, and just really, it was a brutal type of display of force, which is not needed in soccer. And he missed me, unfortunately, but I could still feel the energy of, and I got up and I said, what's going on? I mean, this is a soccer game. We're not battling any sort of, the stakes are not that high, just a soccer game. And the guy turns around, he says, "Go back to your country and stay there."
On the issue of being singled out, the exact same thing happened to me that the young man talked about in the clip. I was coming out of Seattle, Washington, about 8 or 10 years ago from my nephew's funeral. I noticed I was calling my brother to pick me up. I just attended another brother's son's funeral, and I noticed that these police people were congregating around me. And I got to a point where I wanted to know what was going on. So one of the men said, "Let's go over here and talk." My first reaction was, Wendell, this is a good chance to get some good airtime and create havoc. But I decided to resolve that issue and go home. But I was very angry about that. On that flight was one of the vice presidents of the company I worked for 30 years, Tower Automotive. And I seen him later at work and shared that experience. I was fairly well dressed. So the issue of being singled out is real. But what I want to say about this whole issue of racism, and as a black male, it's something I've wanted to say for a long time, and working in a large company and representing people as a union representative, one of the problems that we had in my 30-year history there with African-American males a lot of times would be where white males could push that button, that race, and cause people problems with maintaining, keeping their jobs. And then this whole issue of racism and race, I need to say that us, black men and black people in general, we have to stop allowing ourselves to be disenfranchised by focusing on what white people think of us. In this room today, I noticed what I always see in these discussions is that the white people will clam up and become very quiet, and we become very aggressive.
Yeah, let's
don't do that.
I was actually just going to ask the same question.
Especially those of us who are active in our community. We sit on the library board, or we may be, one of the vice presidents in our companies. And the question is, for a white person to sit there and look around the boardroom and say, there are other white people here, why don't I see Latinos and black people? And not to say anything, you're feeding into the problem. When blacks and Latinos do that, it's the same thing. But I think there ought to be a recognition of the level of power you have, or powerless you have, when you're black and Latino and you're the only one around that board of directors. And you say, why am I the only one? You're putting yourself at jeopardy. And unfortunately, there's not enough leadership like we had back in the 60s that will do that. But I think it really comes down to what do you do as an individual when you hear that the policemen in your neighborhood are randomly stopping black people, Latino people.
Well, give some advice. What should people do?
People should call up their chief of police and say, what is the problem here? People should call up their school system and say, what kind of curriculum are you teaching our kids? We have public officials who are our servants. We vote them in. We tell them what to do. So take action. Don't sit there and just say, we have a problem here.
Thank you.
When these things happen, and we don't have media exposure like this, they are not there.
Okay, thank you. Other side.
I actually had an issue. I lived in Whitefish Bay. I moved from Whitefish Bay. We were in the process of moving. I had a moving person come to my home to estimate. He got back into his car, and someone, the Whitefish Bay police, 2 of them were in front of my house to stop him and to detain him. I went to my front door. I said, he is my guest. Do not detain him. Why are you saying anything to him? And I told them that I would be at the next village board meeting and that I would have a statement for the village board. I was at that meeting and I made a statement to the board. I talked to them about diversity. There was no person from the media at that village board meeting. There were 2 students from the high school. At the end of that meeting, I turned to them and I said, you take this back to your classroom. This is what you need to know that is happening in your community. 2 days later, I got a telephone call from somebody from the Journal, and this person was saying, well, what they said was that they thought he was suspicious, and I said he was my house guest. They may have thought he was suspicious. After that, he wasn't. And she was trying to placate the whole thing, and that's the media.
I find that the best solution for me has been, for myself, has been all my life, is just to confront those individuals head on. And I talked about my experience in my workplace. One of my coworkers who I worked with for 30 years, who was a very gruddy old German guy. And we were talking about coming down to Water Street. And he said I wouldn't drive down there for the life of me. Here's a guy who on the job came across as one of the toughest people on the planet, but who was afraid to come into Milwaukee to go down on Water Street. Fear, racism. My point is, white people are not going to be responsible for giving up their privilege. African Americans, Hispanics, and the rest of us have to do what we have to do to improve our conditions and to challenge that privilege. White people are just not going to give that up. And it's not so much to do with racism, it has to do with self-preservation. And that gets back to your comment about 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we all sat around, we smoked, but we did not inhale. But 30 years later, our children are now at the age of where we want to see them educated and be taken care of. And what we're doing now is trying to preserve what we have to pass on to our own generation. And the rest of us, people of color, we must stop focusing so much on what white people do and focus on what we can do to change our own condition.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Go ahead.
Another point real quickly, as far as, I just want to make this real quick point. Nobody here is transparent. We are all people of color. And that's what we are.
My point is, we said 30 years ago that we tried to correct or expose our children to this. But when a child walks out and he's discriminated against, whether he's taught not to discriminate in the house, that changes his whole perspective. And the other thing I want to say, I haven't heard from the white man that's in the power structure. I heard from the women, I heard from the Hispanic, but the old 45, 50-year-old white man that is controlling the power hasn't said anything tonight.
You're going to hear from one right now, which is me.